Chapter 1. I didn't know my marriage was already over when my phone vibrated behind the counter of my boutique. But I did know this. My husband had emptied our joint account, moved in with a woman half my age, and told his entire family that I was the reason he left. And I'm Marin. This is the story of how staying silent, while everyone blamed me, turned out to be the most dangerous thing I could have done for him. The bell over the front door chimed, and I looked up with the same practiced smile I'd worn for years, the kind you learn when your rent depends on strangers feeling welcome. Outside downtown, Denver was doing what it always did on a Tuesday afternoon. People moved with purpose, coffee in hand, earbuds, in pretending the wind was not cutting straight through their coats. Inside Juniper House, the air was warm and smelled faintly of cedar from the racks my friend Noah built for me, and clean cotton from the new shipment I had steamed that morning. It was calm, predictable mine. I had just finished ringing up a woman, buying a navy wrap dress for a work conference, when my phone vibrated against the counter. I glanced down, out of habit, expecting a delivery update or a reminder from my appointment calendar. Instead, I saw Victor, my husband. My hand went still, not frozen, just suspended in a way I did not recognize. Victor usually called when he wanted something, or he sent quick messages that looked like orders disguised as jokes. Pick up dinner. Did you pay the water bill? Do not forget my suit from the cleaners. He rarely texted in the middle of the day, unless it was important. I tapped the screen. Marin. I have thought this through. I am done. I filed for divorce. I am moving to Fort Lauderdale. I am with Tessa now. Do not make this harder than it has to be. My throat tightened, and for a second the boutique felt too bright, like someone had turned up the lights until everything looked exposed. I read it again slower, like that would change the words. I am done. He filed. He was with someone else. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, not racing, just present, heavy, as if it had moved up from my chest to my head. My customer was still standing there, fiddling with the tissue paper in her bag, looking at the display of earrings near the register. Everything all right, honey? She asked, polite. Warm, concerned in the casual way women are with each other. I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. As I said, sorry, just work stuff. I handed her the bag, thanked her, told her the dress looked perfect on her. She smiled, wished me a good day, and left with the little bell chiming behind her. The second the door closed, the quiet pressed in. I could hear the soft hum of the heater, the distant traffic, the faint music playlist. I kept low so people could still talk. My phone vibrated again, and I took all the money from the joint account. I deserve it after everything. Consider it my fresh start. You will be fine. You have your little store to keep you busy. Little store. My fingers curled around the phone so tightly I could feel the edges biting into my palm. I stared at that line like it was a slap, because it was. Not just the cheating, not just the divorce by text, not just the money. It was the certainty behind it. The way he assumed he could reduce me to a hobby, a distraction, a woman with a cute little project, while he took the real life and walked away. I read his message again, not because I wanted to, but because my brain needed proof that it had happened, that I was not misreading, that I was not overreacting, that I was not being dramatic, a word Victor loved to use whenever my feelings inconvenienced him. My phone buzzed a third time. Do not bother calling, this is final. I am not coming back. Tessa understands me. She is not bitter like you. There was no apology, no explanation, no hesitation. Just a clean, cruel exit, packaged in neat sentences, as if he were cancelling a subscription. I set the phone down on the counter and looked around my boutique. The folded sweaters, the mannequins in the front window, the little vase of dried lavender by the register, the receipt printer with its stupid blinking light, I had built this place from nothing, from a folding table at weekend markets and a credit card I paid off in 3 jobs at once. I had spent nights here alone, painting walls, steaming inventory, balancing spreadsheets until my eyes burned. And my husband had just called it little. I forced myself to move. I walked to the back room and pretended I needed to check inventory. My legs felt steady, which almost scared me more. I wanted to drop to the floor. I wanted to scream. I wanted to do something that matched the violence of what he had done, but my body refused. Instead, I opened a box of new scarves, touched the fabric, and counted them like it mattered. I told myself to breathe, in and out. My phone buzzed again. I can already tell you are going to play the victim. Do not. You always do. I am happy for once. You should try it. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. The thing about being with someone for 13 years is you learn their favorite tricks. Victor had always been good at rewriting reality. If I was hurt, it was because I was sensitive. If I was angry, it was because I was unstable. If I asked questions, it was because I was controlling. He could turn any reaction into evidence that I was the problem. Only this time, he had done it in writing. I did not answer. I finished the day like a person pretending to be herself. I rang up 2 more customers. I complimented a teenager on her prom shoes. I laughed at a joke I did not hear. I smiled until my cheeks ached. Then I flipped the sign to close-lock the front door and stood there for a long moment with my hand on the key. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face and made my eyes water. The streetlights were coming on. The sky was turning that flat, pale color it gets in Denver when winter is settling in. I walked to my car in the small lot behind the building, and only when I sat in the driver's seat did I let my hand shake. I tried logging into our bank account on my phone. Invalid password. Of course, he had changed it. I tried again, slower, careful, like maybe my fingers were the problem. Invalid password. My stomach dropped. Not in a dramatic way, but in a heavy, sick way, like stepping off a curb you thought was level and finding empty air. I stared at the screen, the red warning line, and I could hear Victor's voice in my head, casual and smug. You will be fine. I drove home on autopilot, the city passing by in a blur of headlights and dark storefronts. My neighborhood was quiet, lined with bare trees and small houses tucked close together. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment staring at the front porch light. This house was my mother's. She had left it to me when she died, along with a chipped ceramic bowl I still used for keys and a recipe box filled with handwritten cards. I had kept the place mostly the same, even after Victor moved in. He had wanted to renovate to make it sleek, modern, something to show off. My mother's house had never been about showing off. It had been about staying steady. Inside, the air smelled like the vanilla candle I forgot to blow out that morning. Victor's shoes were gone from the entryway. His coat was not on the hook. The hall closet looked emptier. He had not waited. He had planned. I walked to the kitchen and set my keys in my mother's bowl. My phone vibrated again. You are probably sitting there in that house, acting like you own everything. Do not get comfortable. I am entitled to half of what we built. I am not going to let you take me to the cleaners. I read it once, then again. The audacity was almost impressive. Half of what we built after he emptied the account, after he left, after he told me. I was bitter and old and disposable. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands flat on the wood, and finally let myself feel it. The humiliation, the shock, the anger that burned behind my ribs, hot and sharp. And underneath all of that, something else quieter, but steadier, clarity. Because as I stared at those messages, I saw the last few months in a different light. The late nights at work, the sudden gym obsession, the new cologne, the way he guarded his phone like it was a weapon. The strange charges that popped up in our shared email notifications before he switched everything to paperless billing and told me it was just easier. I had known something was happening. I had just not wanted the shape of it to be this. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through his texts from the beginning, line by line. Each sentence, each little jab, each assumption that I would crumble, that I would beg, that I would panic. He had no idea what I was doing while he was writing them. I set the phone face down on the table and listened to the silence of my mother's house, the kind of silence that used to feel safe. My chest hurt, but my mind was strangely calm, like a storm had finally stopped circling and chosen a direction. Victor thought this was the moment he won. I stared at the wood grain on the table until my breathing slowed, and I let the pause settle, not as an ending, but as the first quiet second after a door slams and you realize you can still stand. Chapter 2. The quiet did not last long, not because the house changed, but because my mind started replaying every moment I had tried to explain away. 3 months earlier, I was standing in the same kitchen, holding my phone over the sink while pasta water boiled. An email notification had popped up from our credit card, the kind I normally ignored. I tapped it without thinking and saw a charge from a hotel in Colorado Springs one night midweek. Victor walked in behind me, loosening his tie, smelling like a new cologne I had not bought. He glanced at my face and knew immediately. "What is it now?" he asked, already tired. I turned the screen toward him. Colorado Springs, on a Wednesday. He did not even blink. "Work trip," he said. "I told you that. You told me you were staying late at the office." Same thing he said, opening the fridge. "We had a client in town. We were up early." I just grabbed a room. "You do not need to audit my life, Marin. Audit." That was his favorite word whenever I asked a question that made him uncomfortable, as if curiosity was a crime. I stared at him, waiting for more, for a detail that sounded like truth. He shrugged. "You know how it is. Meetings, dinner, drinks. You would hate it. I did you a favor." The pasta water boiled over, hissing on the burner. I wiped it up while he ate a handful of grapes at the counter like nothing had happened. I told myself it was plausible. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I did not want to become the kind of woman who checked receipts like a detective. But that night after he fell asleep, I opened our bank app and scrolled through transactions. Like I was looking for a splinter under skin. There were more little things. A charge at a jewelry store I had never visited. 2 different Uber rides that ended nowhere near his office. A bar tab on a night he claimed he was home early before I got back from the boutique. I closed the app and lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, trying to decide if I was scared of the truth or scared of being wrong. By the next week, I was doing something I had never done in my life. I was paying attention without announcing it. I turned on paper statements again, for my personal accounts, not his. I started saving screenshots in a folder labeled Inventory Receipts, because Victor never looked at anything that sounded like my business. At Juniper House, I kept working. I smiled at customers. I priced new arrivals. I posted photos on social media. And in the spaces between, I quietly put my own mask on the one women learn when they realize the person who promised to protect them might be the one they need protection from. I went to a bank across town, a branch I had never visited, because I did not want a familiar teller asking friendly questions. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee from a tiny kiosk in the corner. I sat then in a chair that felt designed to keep you from getting too comfortable and waited to be called. A young man with a neat haircut and a name tag that said Jordan led me to his desk. "How can I help you today?" "Mom?" he asked, voice gentle in a way that made my throat tighten. I took a breath. "I need to open a checking and savings account in my name only." He nodded like that was the most ordinary thing in the world. "It is. People do it every day." Still, my hands shook when he slid the forms toward me. Any reason you are opening a new account? He asked, and then quickly added, you do not have to answer. We just ask sometimes for product recommendations. I looked at the blank lines where my signature would go, and I heard Victor in my head, the way he would say dramatic whenever I showed emotion he did not feel like dealing with. I kept my voice steady. I own a small business. I want to keep things organized. Jordan smiled. That makes sense. What is the business? Juniper House, I said, and the pride in my voice surprised me. Like saying it out loud reminded me who I was outside my marriage. Nice, he said. We love supporting local businesses. Do you want to set up automatic transfers? Yes, I said. A set amount every week. When I left the bank, the sun was bright and cold, and my breath came out in white puffs. I sat in my car and stared at the new debit card in its sealed envelope. My stomach churned not because I felt guilty, but because I felt like I had just crossed an invisible line. At home that night, Victor mentioned he had switched all our billing to paperless to make things easier. You never check the mail anyway, he said, not looking up from his phone. I almost laughed at the neatness of it. He had been closing doors while telling me it was for my convenience. I nodded. Sure. Whatever you want. He glanced at me, then brief suspicious. You're acting weird. Am I asked, keeping my voice light. Yeah, he said. Like you are planning something. I smiled, a small one. Maybe I am planning new inventory. He snorted. Your little store. Do what you want. That phrase again before he ever texted it. Little store. It was how he kept himself bigger. After the first hotel charge, there were more. Not always hotels, sometimes restaurants in neighborhoods he never went to. Sometimes gas station receipts that made no sense with his commute. Sometimes weekend mornings when he said he was going for a run and came back showered and cheerful, like he had just been praised. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to catch him in a lie, with logic. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I pulled out my business documents. Juniper House had been registered before Victor and I got married. My mother had helped me with the first lease. I kept all the paperwork in a file cabinet in the back office, boring and unromantic, exactly the kind of thing Victor would never touch. I made copies anyway and stored them in a safety deposit box under my name, because a strange calm had settled over me. The calm that comes when you accept you might need to leave a burning building and you start mapping the exits. The last person I went to see was not a friend. It was not my sister. It was not anyone who would tell me to talk it out. I went to an attorney. Her office was in a quiet building near the courthouse, with framed diplomas and a bowl of peppermints on the reception desk. Her name was Camille Reyes. She looked like someone who had heard every version of Betrayal and had no patience for excuses. She offered me coffee. I said no. My mouth was too dry. Camille sat across from me and folded her hands. Tell me what is going on. I did not want to sound hysterical. I did not want to sound like a woman who had watched too many crime shows. So I told her facts. The suspicious charges, the change in passwords, the way Victor moved through the house like he owned it, even though the deed was in my name from my mother. Camille listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, I am going to say something that might feel cold, but it will help you. Feelings do not protect you. Documentation does. I nodded slowly. Do you think he is planning to leave? She asked. I hesitated. I do not know. I said it, but my body betrayed me. My shoulders lifted like I was bracing for impact. Camille slid a notepad toward herself. If he leaves, there are temporary steps we can take. But the best thing you can do right now is protect access. That means your own bank account, your own passwords and records that show what is separate and what is shared. Do not threaten him. Do not tip him off. Just prepare. I swallowed. Is that legal? Preparing is legal, she said. Protecting yourself is legal. What gets messy is when people act out of anger and start making choices they cannot explain. You do not strike me as someone who wants to be messy. No, I whispered. I just want to survive this if it happens. Camille nodded once, like she respected that. Then she said, if you are worried about the joint account, move your personal money out now. Leave enough that it does not look like a panic, but do not leave yourself exposed. I sat there for a long moment, absorbing how practical it all was. No dramatic speeches, no vengeance fantasies, just steps. When I walked out of her office, the courthouse steps were crowded with people, smoking and scrolling on their phones, waiting for hearings that would change their lives. I stood at the edge of it and realized something that made my stomach flip. I was closer to them than I had ever wanted to be. And still I did nothing flashy. I did not confront Victor. I did not demand answers. I did not call his mother. I just kept going quietly. Which was why on the day he texted me that he had emptied the joint account, my shock was sharp, but it was not total darkness. There was a thin strip of light I had built for myself, one careful decision at a time. Sitting at my kitchen table now, I picked up my phone again and scrolled through Victor's messages. He kept sending them as if he needed an audience. You are going to regret this if you fight me one read. You will come around when you realize you cannot afford to be stubborn another. He was trying to scare me. He was trying to pull me into the kind of emotional argument where he could paint me as unstable and himself as reasonable. He had done it for years in smaller ways. He would say something cruel, then claim he was joking. He would vanish emotionally for days, then tell me I was clingy for noticing. He would make me question my own memory, then laugh when I apologized. Only now he was putting it all in writing. I did not respond. I did not even type. I just saved everything methodically, the way I logged inventory shipments. Date, time, screenshot, folder. My phone vibrated one more time, and I read it without flinching. I already booked the flight and the hotel. You cannot touch it. It is done. I stared at that line and felt something shift. Not satisfaction, not yet. Something colder, steadier. Victor thought my silence meant I had no move. But while he was busy narrating my collapse, I was collecting the proof of his confidence sentence by sentence and putting it somewhere safe. I set the phone down, washed my hands even though they were not dirty, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at my mother's yard, the bare branches, the porch light glowing against the dusk. I was still hurt. I was still humiliated. My heart still felt like it had been bruised, but underneath all of it, there was a plan forming, not revenge, not drama, just protection. And for the first time since that text hit my screen, I felt my spine straighten, like my body finally remembered it was allowed to hold me up. Chapter 3. The next morning, I opened Juniper House, like muscle memory, turning the key, flipping on the lights, and breathing in that familiar mix of cedar and fabric softener, as if routine could hold me together. I told myself I would get through the day the way I always did, one customer at a time, one receipt at a time, one steady breath at a time. By 10:30, I realized Victor had already started telling his version of the story. My phone rang while I was steaming a row of new blouses in the back room. The caller ID made my stomach tighten. Judith Carson, Victor's mother. I wiped my hands on a towel, stared at the screen for a beat, then answered. Judith? Marin? She said, and her voice was stiff like she was reading from a script she had rehearsed with someone else. I just got off the phone with Victor. I said nothing. I waited. The silence on my end felt like holding my ground. He told me what happened, she continued. He says you have been cold for years. He says you care more about that shop than your marriage. My fingers tightened around the phone. The word shop hit the same way little store had hit. A reduction, A dismissal, a way to make me smaller. Judith, I said carefully, I'm at work. So am I, in my own way. She snapped, then softened immediately, like she realized she had raised her voice. I just want to understand Maren. Why would you push him away like this? Why would you make him feel unwanted? The accusation sat between us. Not did he cheat, not did he take the money. But what did I do to cause it? I didn't push him into anything, I said. That's not what he said, she replied, and I could hear papers shuffling like she was pacing. He said you interrogate him. He said you are always suspicious. He said he couldn't breathe in his own home. I stared at the steam rising off the fabric, watched it disappear into the air. Judith, I said, I'm not going to argue with you. There was a pause. Then her tone turned sharper again. So you won't deny it? I won't perform for this, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm not going to be put on trial over the phone. She inhaled, slow and dramatic, then delivered the final cut. Well, he's your husband, or he was, and now he's gone. Maybe you should ask yourself why. She hung up before I could answer. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear for a second, after the line went dead. My throat burned, but I did not cry, not because I was strong, because crying felt like giving her what she wanted. Proof that I was unstable, proof that Victor's story had landed. I set the phone down and walked back to the front of the boutique. The bell chimed as a customer entered, a woman in her 50s, with a neat bob and expensive boots. She smiled at me, then her eyes flicked to my face as if she were trying to read a headline. Morning, Maren, she said. You doing okay? I'm fine, I replied too quickly. She nodded, like she didn't believe me, then drifted toward the sweaters. That was how it went all day. People who normally talked about fabrics and sizing suddenly had a soft, cautious tone, like they were speaking near a hospital bed. A few were kind, a few were curious. One woman asked it outright while holding a blouse to her chest. So I heard your husband moved to Florida, she said, like it was weather. I kept my smile polite. I'm focusing on work, I said. She tilted her head. That's good. Men do things for a reason, you know. Sometimes we don't see our part in it until after. My stomach tightened. There it was again. The assumption that I had a part in his betrayal. Like adultery was a mutual project. Thank you for your concern, I said, and my voice stayed pleasant even as my hands shook under the counter. At lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother. Eli was the one person I wanted to call, but I had not yet. I had not wanted his pity, his rage, the way he would immediately offer to come over and fix things with his fists. His message was simple. You okay? I stared at it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I'm handling it. Before I could type anything else, another message popped up, not from Eli. It was from Mason Carson, Victor's older brother. I had not spoken to Mason in months. The text read like a warning. Judith says you two are done. Victor says you've been controlling him. He says you've been taking money from the account. If this gets ugly, it's on you. I read it twice, then a third time. I could almost hear Victor's voice behind it, guiding Mason, feeding him lines, casting himself as the victim before I even opened my mouth. My chest tightened with a familiar sensation. That old reflex to explain myself, to prove I was reasonable, to show my work like a student trying to avoid punishment. I did not respond. Instead, I opened the folder on my phone where I had been saving screenshots. I saved Mason's message too. Date, time, another brick in the wall. Victor thought I didn't know how to build. Around 3, my phone buzzed again. Victor. I looked at the screen and felt a cold calm settle over me. His message was short. Stop ignoring me. We need to talk. Then another. You're telling people lies about me. Then another, more dramatic. My mum is upset. You're making her think I'm the bad guy. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly him. He was furious that I had not defended his reputation while he burned my life down. I typed one word, then deleted it. I set the phone down. I forced myself to fold tissue paper, to straighten hangers, to breathe. An hour later, he sent another message. I'm entitled to half of everything. Don't get cute with this. I saved it. Then a message that made my stomach drop. Tessa says you shut off the card. What the hell did you do? That was the first time all day I felt something other than humiliation. Not victory, not relief, just confirmation. Tessa was real. The relationship was real. And the moment real life got uncomfortable, Victor was already pointing the blame at me. For a second, I pictured her, 20-something, freshly manicured, sitting beside him in some bright hotel lobby, watching him argue with a front desk clerk, while his voice rose and his face tightened. I could almost see her expression shift from impressed to uncertain. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A young woman's voice came through, careful but defensive. Is this Marin? Yes. This is Tessa, she said like she expected me to gasp. Victor said you froze his card. He said you were trying to ruin his life. I closed my eyes. The audacity was so immediate, it almost took my breath away. I didn't freeze anything, I said evenly. She scoffed. He can't pay for the hotel. He said you're doing it because you're jealous. Jealous, like I was competing with her like we were the same. I kept my voice low, controlled the way I spoke to customers who wanted to fight over return policies. Tessa, I'm not discussing my marriage with you. You don't even want him, she snapped. He told me you treat him like a roommate. I could hear Victor in the background, his voice muffled but angry. Tell her to fix it, he said. Something in me went still. Tessa, I said, if Victor promised you a clean, happy exit, he lied. That's all I'm going to say. There was a pause, a small crack in her certainty. What do you mean? She asked quieter. I pictured her gripping her phone, looking at Victor for reassurance, waiting for him to tell her I was crazy. I mean, adults don't leave a marriage by text and call it love, I said. I mean, if he emptied our joint account, he will empty whatever you build with him too. Her breathing changed, a small inhale that sounded like doubt. Then she recovered, trying to sound tough again. You're just bitter, she said, but it landed weak. I heard Victor's voice again, louder now. Hang up! He barked. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. My heart was pounding, but my face felt calm, almost blank. I had not yelled. I had not begged. I had not insulted her. And still I knew that call would echo in her head later, when Victor's charm wore thin and his panic showed through. When I closed the boutique that evening, the sun had already dropped behind the buildings, turning the street into long shadows. I locked the door and stood for a moment with my forehead resting against the glass. I felt alone in a way that was hard to describe. Not just abandoned, misunderstood, miscast. As if my life had been handed to someone else to narrate, and suddenly I was the villain in my own story. But then I thought about Judith's accusations, Mason's warning, Tessa's call, Victor's frantic texts. All of it circling one truth. They needed me to react. They needed me to scream and explain and beg, because that was how they kept control. That was how Victor had always stayed one step ahead. He provoked, then judged my response. This time I did not give it to him. I drove home through quiet streets, the headlights cutting a narrow path in the dark. And when I stepped into my mother's house, the silence greeted me again. It did not feel safe yet. It felt like a waiting room. I set my keys in the ceramic bowl. I plugged in my phone. I opened my screenshot folder and scrolled through the day's messages like evidence laid out on a table. Outside, the wind tapped softly against the windows. Inside, I sat down and let the loneliness pass through me without turning it into a performance. I was between two worlds now, the story Victor was telling and the reality I was collecting. And for the first time, I understood I did not need anyone to believe me immediately. I just needed to stay steady long enough for the truth to surface on its own. Chapter 4. Camille moved fast, not in a dramatic way, but in the kind of steady, practiced way that told me she had seen men like Victor try to win by wearing people down. 2 days after Judith called me and Tessa tried to pick a fight over the phone, I sat in Camille's office again. The same quiet building near the courthouse. The same bowl of peppermints on the reception desk. The same air that smelled faintly of copier toner and lemon cleaner. Camille slid a printed stack of papers across the desk. "This is a motion for a temporary financial restraining order," she said. I stared at the words. Temporary, financial, restraining, order. They felt heavy, official, like a door clicking shut. "It sounds intense," I said. "It is protective," she replied. "Not punitive. There is a difference." I looked up. "What does it actually do?" "It asks the court to stop him from draining accounts or creating more joint debt while the divorce is pending," Camille said. "It also puts the joint funds and any contested assets under the court's supervision, so he cannot keep moving money like it is his personal allowance." My hands rested on my knees. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "And will the court do it?" I asked. Camille leaned back, studying me for a moment. "That depends on evidence, not heartbreak. You have evidence, his texts, the account activity, the timeline. We will present it cleanly." She paused, then added, "Victor will act like this is an overreaction. He will call it a misunderstanding. He will say you are being vindictive. Let him. Judges do not care about his opinions. They care about documentation." I swallowed. "What if he lies?" "He will," Camille said almost casually. "Most people do. We respond with facts." She tapped the stack again. "I need your bank statements, the joint account history, and your business documents. All of them. Formation papers, tax returns, profit and loss. Anything that shows your boutique existed independently and was not mixed with marital funds. Juniper House was mine before him," I said. "I know," she replied. "We are going to make the court know." I handed her the folder I had brought, thicker than I expected. Copies of paperwork, screenshots, notes I had taken in the margins, like a student who finally realized the test was real. Camille nodded as she flipped through it. "This is good," she said. "This is what steady looks like." That afternoon, I drove straight to the bank again, the same branch with the carpet that smelled too clean, and asked for printed records. I kept my voice calm, like I was requesting a duplicate receipt, not proof that my marriage had turned into a legal file. Jordan, the banker, who helped me open my account, recognized me. "Hey, Marin," he said, and his smile faded when he saw my face. "You okay?" "I need statements," I said, "for the joint account, and any account history you can provide." Hey, his eyes flicked up, careful. "We can print what you have access to. If your access has been removed, that changes things." "My access has been removed," I said. Jordan's expression shifted professional quiet. "Okay. I am going to do what I can. It might take a minute." While he worked, I watched people come and go. A woman depositing cash from a small business. A man arguing about a late fee. A couple opening a college savings account. Normal problems. Normal days. I wondered how many of them had a private emergency sitting in their stomach the way I did. Jordan returned with a stack of papers. "This is the joint account history from the last 6 months," he said. "This is what we can produce quickly. If your attorney needs certified records, she can request them formally." "Thank you," I whispered. He lowered his voice. "I am sorry you are going through this." I nodded once because if I spoke again, I might crack. By the time I got back to the boutique, my phone was buzzing like it could not stand being ignored. I did not check it until after I locked the door behind my last customer and turned the sign to closed. 4 missed calls from Victor, 2 voicemails, 8 texts. I opened the first voicemail with my thumb hovering like I was diffusing something. His voice came through tight and angry, then suddenly soft, like he was auditioning for sympathy. "Maren, stop doing this. You are making this so much worse than it needs to be. Call me back. We can handle this like adults." The next voicemail was a different man, sharper, louder. "If you keep messing with my money, I swear to God, I will take you for everything. You think that little store is yours? It is ours. Half. You hear me? Half." I sat behind the counter, listening, then saved both voicemails. I opened the texts. "Why are you ignoring me? My lawyer says you cannot just shut things off. You're going to regret this." Then minutes later, "Can we talk? I did not mean it like that. I just needed space." Then another swing. "You have always been controlling. This is why I left." I stared at the screen, not shocked anymore, just exhausted by the predictability. Threaten, soften, threaten again. He was trying every lever he had used on me for 13 years. I saved them all. The next day, Camille called me mid-morning. "His attorney responded," she said. My stomach dropped. "Already?" "Yes, and it is exactly what I expected," Camille replied. "They are trying to delay. They claim this is a private marital misunderstanding, and you are overreacting. They want more time to file a formal response." "More time for him to move money," I said, and the anger in my voice surprised me. "Exactly," Camille said. "We are pushing for an emergency hearing. The judge may grant it quickly, may not. But your evidence increases the chance." I exhaled slowly. "What do I need to do?" "Keep collecting everything," she said. "And do not engage with him. Every call you take becomes a place he can twist your words. Let him keep texting." That evening, Victor texted again. "My mum says you are trying to destroy me. You are embarrassing me. Tessa is upset. Fix the card situation." Now I stared at the message about Tessa and a strange calm drifted through me. Not happiness, confirmation. The fantasy was already cracking. Real life was already inconvenient. 2 days later, Camille called again. "We got a hearing," she said. My grip tightened around my phone. "When?" "Friday morning," she replied. "Denver District Court, Division 12, Judge Alan Prescott. Friday. 3 days away. Fast but not instant. Enough time for my nerves to build a nest of panic." "What do I wear?" I asked, then immediately hated myself for asking something so small. Camille did not laugh. She understood the question was not about clothes. "Wear something simple," she said. "Look like yourself, calm, prepared. Let the papers do the talking." That Friday, I woke before my alarm. The sky was still dark, the house quiet. I made coffee I barely drank. I dressed in a navy blouse and black slacks, hair pulled back, no jewelry, except my mother's thin gold ring on my right hand. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in a courtroom, not someone who had been dragged there. Camille met me outside the courthouse steps. She carried a briefcase. I carried a folder I did not need because she already had everything, but holding it made me feel less naked. "You ready?" she asked. "As I can be," I said. She nodded. Remember, he is going to perform. Do not react to the performance. Inside the courthouse smelled like metal detectors and old paper. People sat on benches, eyes fixed ahead. Lawyers murmured in low voices. A bailiff called names with no emotion. Life-changing moments announced, like grocery order numbers. Victor was already there when we entered the courtroom. He stood near the front, wearing a suit I had bought him for our anniversary. He looked thinner, and his jaw was tight. Beside him was a man in a grey suit, his attorney. Tessa was not there. Judith was not there. Mason was not there. It was just Victor finally alone with the consequences. His eyes locked on me, and his face shifted into something practiced, wounded. "You really did this," he muttered as I passed. Camille placed a hand lightly at my elbow, guiding me forward, like a boundary. "We are not speaking to him," she said quietly. Victor scoffed. "Of course, silent treatment. That is her specialty." I kept walking. My hands were cold, but I did not look at him again. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Judge Prescott was older, silver hair glasses low on his nose. He looked tired, in the way people do when they have seen the same arguments 1,000 times. We sat. Camille rose when it was our turn. "Your Honor, this is a motion for a temporary financial restraining order based on the respondent's withdrawal of joint marital funds and continued attempts to create or shift financial obligations during pending dissolution," she said, voice even. Victor's attorney stood immediately. "Your Honor, this is a marital dispute being exaggerated into an emergency," he said. "My client maintains there was a misunderstanding regarding shared funds, and he has been unfairly accused of misconduct." The judge lifted a hand, stopping him. "I do not need speeches," Judge Prescott said. "I need facts. Soraya, show me the facts." Camille did not blink. She presented the joint account history, the withdrawals, the timing, the sudden password change. Then she presented the text messages, printed, dated, arranged in order. Victor shifted in his seat. Camille read the lines that mattered, not all of them, just the ones that cut clean. Victor saying he emptied the account. Victor saying Marin would be fine. Victor describing flights and hotels. Victor admitting he had taken the money for a fresh start. Then Camille presented the credit card disputes and the pending transactions framed as protective steps, not sabotage. "The petitioner did not fabricate fraud," Camille said. "She requested a dispute and temporary protection due to the respondent's own written admissions and his pattern of using joint financial instruments for non-marital purposes." Judge Prescott looked down at the papers, then up at Victor. "Mr. Hale," he said, using Victor's full name like it mattered, "did you withdraw funds from the joint account without mutual agreement?" Victor opened his mouth, then closed it. "It was our money," he said finally. "I needed it. She would have taken it from me." The judge's expression did not change. "Did you withdraw it without mutual agreement?" he repeated. Victor's face reddened. "Yes." The judge nodded once as if checking a box. "And you sent these messages?" he asked, tapping the printed texts. Victor glanced at his attorney, then back at the judge. "Yes," he said quieter. The judge turned to Camille again. "Miss Reyes, you referenced the petitioner's business and home as separate property," he said. "Show me." Camille presented the deed to my mother's house in my name, only dated years before my marriage. She presented the formation documents for Juniper House, established before my wedding. She presented tax returns that showed business income, kept separate, no commingling, clean bookkeeping. Victor's attorney tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, we have not had time to review all of this documentation," he said. "We request a continuance." Judge Prescott looked at him, unimpressed. "You had time to file a response calling this a misunderstanding," he said. "If you want time, you should have asked for it before your client emptied a joint account and bragged about it in writing." The courtroom went quiet. Victor stared at the table in front of him. For the first time since I had met him, he had nothing clever to say. Judge Prescott spoke calmly, like someone explaining gravity. "Temporary orders are designed to prevent ongoing harm while a case proceeds," he said. "Based on the respondent's admissions and the documentation provided, I am granting a temporary financial restraining order. The joint marital funds are to be preserved. The respondent is ordered to account for and return the withdrawn amount pending further proceedings. Neither party is to incur new joint debt or dispose of contested assets." He looked directly at Victor. "This is not a suggestion," he said. "This is an order." Victor nodded stiffly. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, a silent warning to stay quiet. Camille sat down. I sat there, 2 hands folded, face calm, like I was watching someone else's life on a screen. I expected to feel triumphant. I did not. I felt air rush back into a room that had been sealed for too long. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun was bright and indifferent. People walked by carrying coffee, talking about weekend plans. Camille paused on the steps. "It went well," she said. I nodded. My throat tightened. "I do not feel like I thought I would," I admitted. Camille gave a small, sympathetic smile. "That is normal," she said. "You are not winning a game. You are getting your life back." I stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. Victor walked past us without looking. Shoulders hunched, jaw clenched, moving fast, like he could outrun the reality that had just caught him. I did not follow him with my eyes. I just breathed slow and steady and let the quiet return, not as surrender, but as space. Chapter 5. The weeks after the hearing passed in a way I did not expect. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady, like water finding its level after a storm. The first real change showed up in my phone. The buzzing stopped. Victor did not text me every morning anymore. There were no late-night messages swinging between anger and apology. No voicemails trying to pull me back into an argument. Silence settled where noise had lived for years, and at first it felt unnatural, like a ringing in my ears after a concert. Camille checked in once a week, always brief, always factual. The order held. The returned funds were accounted for. Victor had complied, not gracefully, but completely enough to keep himself out of deeper trouble. His attorney stopped posturing and started negotiating, like someone who understood the room had changed. I learned the difference between peace and relief during those weeks. Relief is loud. Peace is quiet. Relief makes you want to tell everyone what happened. Peace makes you want to go to bed early and wake up without dread. I heard about Victor through other people, not from him. Judith stopped calling. Mason stopped texting. No apologies came with the silence, but the accusations disappeared too. It was as if they had all agreed, without saying it out loud, to step back from a story that no longer made sense. One afternoon, Eli called me while I was reorganizing the back room at Juniper House. So he said, "Careful." I heard he moved back in with his mum. I sat on the floor between boxes of scarves and leaned my head against the wall. "Yeah," I said. "That's what I heard too." Eli exhaled. "You okay with that?" I thought about it for a moment. I pictured Victor in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by old trophies and faded posters, trying to explain to his mother how everything had gone wrong. "I don't really feel anything about it," I said, honestly. "And I think that's the point." There was a pause on the line. "I'm proud of you," Eli said. "You know that, right?" I closed my eyes. "I know." He did not push for details. He did not ask what I was going to do next. He trusted that I would figure it out, and that trust felt like a gift I had not realized I was missing. The last time I heard Victor's name directly was from Camille. He changed jobs, she told me during one of our check-ins. Took a position with less travel, less flexibility. I pictured the irony and felt nothing sharper than a dull acknowledgement. And Tessa Camille added, then hesitated. She's gone. I did not ask questions. I did not need to know the details. I could imagine them easily enough. The card not working, the hotel desk waiting, Victor's voice rising, the promises thinning under the pressure. Okay, I said. Camille paused. How are you doing, Marin? Really? I looked around my boutique. The front windows caught the afternoon sun. A customer laughed softly with Lena near the register. The space felt lived in warm. I sleep, I said, all the way through the night. Camille smiled, even though I could only hear it. That's a good sign. At home, my mother's house felt different too. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I stopped checking the locks twice before bed. I stopped listening for footsteps that were never coming. I stopped bracing for the sound of a door opening late at night. One evening, I opened the drawer in my desk, where I kept old paperwork. Inside, beneath insurance forms and tax receipts, was the screenshot of Victor's first message, the one where he told me he was done and assumed I would be fine. I held it for a moment, thumb brushing the edge of the paper. I did not keep it because I was angry. I kept it because it reminded me of the exact moment my instincts had been right. The moment I stopped doubting myself. The moment I chose to protect instead of appease. I slid it back into the drawer and closed it gently. Juniper House did not explode into some overnight success story. I did not double my revenue or open a second location. What I did was steadier. I hired one more part-time employee. I renegotiated my lease. I adjusted my hours so I could leave before dark if I wanted to. Small things, sustainable things. The biggest change was invisible. I stopped waking up with a knot in my stomach. I stopped waiting for a tone in my phone that meant I had done something wrong. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. One morning, months after the hearing, I unlocked the front door of the boutique and stood there for a second longer than usual. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching dust motes in the air. The city outside was waking up. People walked past with coffee cups and backpacks, minds already on the day ahead. It was ordinary, and it was everything. I thought about how close I had come to losing myself by trying to keep a marriage intact at all costs. How easy it is to confuse endurance with loyalty. How often women are taught that being accommodating is the same as being kind. I did not win because Victor lost. I won because I stopped letting someone else decide the terms of my life. If there is anything I hope stays with you after hearing my story, it is this. Pay attention to the quiet signals. Protect what you build. Ask the questions you have been taught to swallow, and trust that standing still is sometimes the most powerful move you can make. If this story made you think about your own boundaries, your own finances, or the places in your life where you have been shrinking to keep the peace, you are not alone. You do not have to make any decisions today. Just notice what you notice. That is how it starts. The bell over the door chimed as Lena walked in behind me, already talking about a customer who wanted a dress set aside. I smiled, stepped back into my space and let the morning unfold calm and steady exactly the way I had earned it.